Rain. It never seemed to stop in this city. A relentless downpour that mirrored the grim mood clinging to the streets. The neon lights reflected off the wet asphalt, a kaleidoscope of colors in the urban abyss. This was my city. A city where shadows whispered secrets the living couldn't hear, and the past never truly died. My name is Max Carter, and I navigate these murky waters, a detective who's seen too much and expects even more. The scent of cheap whiskey and stale cigarette smoke hung heavy in my small apartment. The incessant drumming of rain against the window pane did little to soothe my thoughts. My reflection stared back from the glass, a worn face etched with the cynicism of countless investigations. I was a man caught between the hope of justice and the harsh realities of the world I lived in. The shrill ring of the phone cut through the silence. I picked up, the voice on the other end gruff and familiar. It was Captain Hayes.
Carter, we've got a case. An old friend has resurfaced.
His words sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't just any case. This was about Laura Monroe, a ghost from a past I thought I'd buried long ago. Laura Monroe. Her name echoed in my mind, a chilling whisper from a forgotten nightmare. 10 years ago, she was a rising star, her beauty only surpassed by her talent. Then, one rainy night, she vanished, gone without a trace. The case had haunted me ever since. It had been my first major investigation, and I had failed. Hayes's voice brought me back to the present.
We got a lead, Carter. A witness. Someone who claims they saw Laura the night she disappeared.
Hope and skepticism warred within me. False leads were cruel reminders of what I couldn't change. Still, the thought of Laura, alive after all these years, ignited a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. The rain had intensified, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I grabbed my trench coat, the weight familiar and comforting. As I stepped out into the night, the city seemed to close in around me, its grim embrace both familiar and unsettling. Tonight, I was stepping back into the shadows, back into the heart of a mystery that had haunted me for a decade. The police station was a hive of activity, even at this late hour. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the faces of weary officers. I made my way through the maze of desks, each one piled high with paperwork. Hayes was waiting for me, his face etched with a mixture of hope and concern.
Glad you could make it, Carter.
He gestured me into his cramped office. The air in Hayes's office was thick with cigarette smoke. He tossed a file onto his desk, the words Laura Monroe stamped across it.
We need to be certain, Carter. If there's even a chance she's alive...
He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what was at stake. I opened the file, the familiar details of the case flooding back. Photos of Laura, her vibrant smile a stark contrast to the grim reality of her disappearance. Witness statements, now yellowed with time, offered snippets of information but no concrete leads. A wave of fatigue washed over me, the weight of the past threatening to pull me under. This case had already taken too much from me. I wasn't sure I had the strength to face it again. The Velvet Lounge was a smoky den of secrets, the kind of place where whispers traveled further than words. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and desperation, the clinking of glasses, a constant backdrop to hushed conversations. I found her at a table in the back, her fiery red hair a beacon in the dim light. Sophie Garcia, I said, my voice barely a murmur above the jazz music swirling around us. She turned, her eyes sharp and intelligent, taking in my every detail. Sophie Garcia was a reporter, known for her relentless pursuit of the truth and her disdain for authority. We had clashed before, our paths crossing in the city's underbelly.
Detective Carter, what an unexpected pleasure.
She took a sip of her drink, her gaze never leaving mine. I hear you're chasing ghosts, Sophie, I said, placing a file on the table. Her eyes flickered to the file, her expression unreadable. Ghosts that have been silent for a long time, I added, watching her reaction. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, replaced quickly by a mask of composure.
Laura Monroe. The case has been cold for years.
The rain had eased to a drizzle as we left the Velvet Lounge, the city streets slick and shimmering under the streetlights.
Why are you really here, Carter?
Sophie asked, her voice barely audible above the city's muted symphony. I lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. Let's just say, some ghosts deserve justice, I replied, the smoke curling into the night air. We walked in silence for a while, our footsteps echoing on the wet pavement. The city seemed to hold its breath, the weight of secrets pressing down on us.
I've been following this lead for weeks. A name, a place. That's all I have.
She handed me a crumpled piece of paper. On it, scrawled in hurried handwriting, were 2 words. Adrian Black. The docks. Adrian Black. The name sent a chill down my spine. He was a phantom, a whisper in the criminal underworld, rumored to be ruthless, connected, and always one step ahead. If anyone knew the truth about Laura Monroe's disappearance, it would be him. The docks, I murmured, more to myself than to Sophie. It was a desolate wasteland of abandoned warehouses and forgotten dreams, the perfect place to bury a secret or a life. The warehouse loomed before us, a hulking silhouette against the night sky. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay, a reminder of the sea that had long since abandoned this forgotten corner of the city. The only sound was the wind whistling through the broken windows, a mournful lament that sent shivers down my spine.
This feels wrong, she said, her voice tight with apprehension.
I had to agree. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant screech of a seagull. It was the kind of silence that screamed danger, the kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Stay close," I said, my hand instinctively reaching for the revolver holstered at my hip. We moved cautiously towards the entrance, the rusty metal groaning in protest as I pushed open the heavy door. The interior was cloaked in darkness, the only light filtering through the grimy windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the dusty floor. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. Fear, cold and primal, tightened its grip on my chest. This place had a pulse, a dark, malevolent energy that whispered of violence and despair. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture lay scattered across the floor, remnants of a life interrupted. A single chair lay overturned, as if whoever had been sitting there had left in a hurry. Sophie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My gaze followed hers to a wall at the back of the warehouse where faded photographs were pinned, forming a macabre collage. The photographs were of Laura Monroe, pictures from magazines, newspaper clippings, even candid snapshots. They depicted her rise to fame, her face young and full of life, staring back at us from across the years. But it was the last photograph that stole my breath. It was a recent picture taken within the last few months. Laura, her eyes filled with a haunting sadness, stood in front of this very warehouse. She was alive.
She was here, Carter, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. She was here, and somebody knows why.
Her words echoed in the stillness of the warehouse, heavy with unspoken implications. My mind raced. Who had taken these photos and why? Was Laura being held captive, or was there something more sinister at play? A glint of metal caught my eye. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my chest. In the far corner of the warehouse, partially hidden by a pile of rotting canvas, lay a trunk. It was old and battered, its leather surface cracked and faded. The air around it seemed to crackle with a strange energy, a sense of foreboding that sent chills down my spine.
What is it? Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper.
I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was already kneeling beside the trunk, my fingers tracing the outline of a tarnished lock. It was a simple lock, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, 1,000 unanswered questions. With a deep breath, I pulled out my penknife and wedged the blade into the lock. It gave way with a snap, the sound deafening in the stillness of the warehouse. The musty scent of decay wafted from the trunk as I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed newspapers and moth-eaten clothes, lay a human skull. Its empty sockets seemed to stare back at me accusingly. This wasn't just any skull. It was Laura Monroe's. A cold hand seemed to grip my heart, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Laura was dead, and this was just the beginning. The shrill ringing of my phone shattered the silence. I answered, my voice hoarse.
"Carter," a gravelly voice said on the other end. "I see you found my little gift."
It was Adrian Black. black, I growled, my fingers tightening around the phone. You're playing a dangerous game.
He chuckled, a chilling sound that echoed in the vast emptiness of the warehouse. A game you've already lost, detective, he said. Now, you'll have to play by my rules.
The line went dead. I looked at Sophie, her face pale, her eyes reflecting the horror of our discovery. The game had just begun, and we were pawns in a game orchestrated by a master manipulator. The rain started again, a steady drumming against the warehouse roof. The city held its breath, waiting, watching. And in the heart of the storm, we stood. Two souls bound by a shared darkness, ready to face the shadows that loomed before us. The past, it seemed, was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun.